Man, there's so many stats to keep track of in the modern NBA. There are more and more players entering the league. If only there was a way to tell how good a player is. Well, our program can do that with only a couple keyboard inputs. Ever wonder who's better, LeBron or Curry? Well, this program uses objective stats and awards to determine who the best NBA player is right now. This is great for NBA scouts to see what up-and-coming rookies are doing, GMs to look for trades that favor them in the long term, coaches to look at players who the team is playing against in a couple games to get the edge in the game plan, or even players to see what they're worth. First, we're going to explain the features and what they do in a high level, then we're going to go through each class function in more detail. First, you register with an ID and a password, so the program can know who you are. Then the program will ask you what kind of user you are, regular or premium. If you pay, then you are a premium user. If you didn't, you're a regular. After logging in, if you're a regular user, you will go to our regular user menu. In this menu, you can look at the player stats, and that's pretty much about it. This is our free tier, so there are not a lot of features. If you're a premium user, then you have access to the premium menu, which has many more features. The first is a trade simulator, where there are 4 teams, and players are randomly assigned to each team. You then pick which team you want to be on, and try to simulate a trade with the other 3 teams. This feature is good for GMs who want to win now and want to get a superstar player using their less valuable players and draft picks. The next feature is a rookie draft, which allows you to see future picks and how they're valued. This is a useful tool for scouts to see which rookies they should focus on in the upcoming years. The last feature is scout evaluation, which is similar to the stats of our players in the regular menu, but also shows their worth according to our algorithm. Now we'll go through every method and every class in our code and explain how each of them works. So this is our second part of our video where we explain in depth about our code and how it works. Jay, would you like to explain how the main menu creating the ID works?
Yeah, so basically the first menu of the program will walk you through how to make your ID or logging into an ID if you already have one. And basically the algorithm behind it is that first I'll explain the user.h file. Obviously it has a constructor which contains ID, password, name, and access level per user. And obviously for each user it will have getter and setter function so that we have access to these private variables. So in my user util.cpp, it includes user.h, includes user util.h, and for the finding password, it takes ID and dynamic array and size, int size as a parameter. And what it does is it loops through the dynamic array and tries to see if the ID that we are passing in matches the ID of the user that we're looping through. And if it does match, it will return the user's password for the matching ID. And if it doesn't, then it will return invalid ID, check your ID again. And these return strings will be displayed in my code. So right here, wrong ID or password. If you get your ID wrong for the first time, then you can enter 1 to find your password, and then you'll have to enter your ID, and we'll use the user_util.findPassword function to return the resulting string. User_util upgrade access, it takes user as a parameter. And what it basically does is it sets the access level to 2, access level 1 being regular ID and 2 being premium ID. And we'll be using this access level later on in our code to determine which menu you will be redirected to. And user util add user, that it will take user dynamic array and in size and user as a parameter, and it will create a new dynamic array of users with the size we take on as a parameter, which is already incremented by 1 previously each every time you add a new user. And what this loop does is that it will loop through for every iteration of the loop. It will assign our old user dynamic array to temp dynamic array, which we made with new size, so it will have one more size to it, and then the last index of the new array will assign the new user that we're adding to the array, and then we'll delete the old array and return the new array. So we'll have a new array with the new size and new user. And login, it will take user dynamic array, string ID, string password, and int size. And basically, we'll loop for the number of size there is, the size of the dynamic array. And if the ID and password matches a certain user, then we'll return a user, which we'll be using for our next menu.
So what were the challenges with implementing the user.h and CPP and the util? What would you say the hardest part was for you?
The hardest part was creating ID and creating password, or finding password part wasn't that hard, but the most challenging part was how are we going to implement logging in part. So how would you know which ID is logged in at the moment, which user is using our program at the moment? And the way we figured it out was to, in a login method, we're returning a user, and we're gonna make it a current user. And we're gonna return that at the end of the method so that we can use it for the second menu. So unless you're logging out, or in this case, exiting the program, everything we're gonna be doing from here and on will be related to the current user that we just returned from logging in.
Oh, I see. So what happens after you get all this user information?
So if we go back to the main menu, logged in, so user logged in would be the current user, in this case, that main menu return. And for the second login int, which would be returning an int, but at this moment, it will take a current user as a parameter, and we'll be altering current user's informations to go on in our code or program.
I see.
One more thing I'd like to say about the main menu is that there is a hard-coded admin ID, which its access level is obviously 3 because that's what stands for admin level access. And its name would be set to admin, and ID will be set to MBA admin, password MBA123. And later on, we'll be using this account to access the admin access level menu, which we'll be discussing later on in the video. As we discussed before, the main menu method will return a user, and the second menu method will take that user as a parameter, and we're gonna use this user, in this case user logged in, to successfully log you in to use our other features in the program. And what it would do is it will get the logged in user's access level, and if it's 3, you'll be redirected to admin menu, and if it's 1, which it will be 1 by default when you create a new account, it will ask you if you'd like to upgrade your access level to a premium level. And how it works is it will ask you to enter 1 or 2 if you'd like to upgrade it. and it will just basically use set access method to set your access level to 2. And when you're logging in, after this if and else statements, unless you've logged in with an admin access level account, it will return an integer 1 or 2. And for admin, it will return 3. And how we're gonna make use of this return integer is in this main menu. Int second login int, which will be returned from, which is an int returned from our method that we just discussed about, will be used in a premium access method as a parameter. Do you have any questions?
I just have a question. I just want to ask about the admin. I'm excited to hear about it. It sounds like so hard to do. Getting access to everyone's user information and then modifying it. How did you do that? And also, was it hard?
Oh, it was so hard. It actually took a long time. How we did it is I used dynamic array for the users, so I could probably go through it with you. So as you could see, we use dynamic array here, and I set it to private variable here. So dynamic array users will be able to access this in other method outside of the initial method that we first introduced it to. And user size will be also shared. And the way we did it is under premium access, 1, 2, 3. So this is the admin menu section.
I see.
Yep. So in this method, we'll be able to modify the user's information and also view user's information and save it to a CSV file as well.
Oh.
And yeah, from what I was saying before, using the integer that we got from the second menu method, we divided into 3 parts. This method, 1 being the regular menu, 2 being the premium ID, 3 being the admin. And if you enter 3, which in this case the access level would dominate what kind of menu that you have access to. But if you're logged into the admin, as long as you enter 3 to exit the program, this loop will run and you'll be able to use the features on it. And if you enter 1 user information function, which should be under, it will loop. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it seems like you use a lot of methods to get this to work.
One of the things that I had in mind was I didn't want to overcomplicate one method too much. Although since our project, the scale of our project was larger than we expected.
Oh yeah.
So it did become a lot messy, but I try to keep it as simple as possible, as clean as possible, I guess.
Very good coding practices in this in the admin. I like it.
Yes, but I feel like we could have done better when it comes to making the code look less complicated.
Yeah, there are spots where
it's improvements, but we're only a year in, so I feel like we could improve over time. First thing I did was to loop through all the users, which was a global variable. So we know how many users there are already. So we converted the user's access level to a string. So if it's 1 regular, 2 premium, and else it's admin. So just cout name access, which is now a string, and ID and password. That's the viewing the information part. And the CSV file basically takes in the user size, user array, and CSV name. And using OF stream, I was able to store the information into CSV file, which will show all this at the end of our video, where we'll do a brief run through of their code and explain it a little bit more at that time. And for the modifying user information, it will ask you what kind of modification you would like to use on which user. So you'd have to enter the user's ID in order to access the user's information, and then depending on what you enter from there on, you'd have a power to modify user's ID or password or access level or whatnot. And in this section, this is the only section that you can modify a user's access level to on admin level. That's something noteworthy. And how we did it is we, in the new user list, we're basically taking in a user array and we're returning a new array with modified user information. So we're basically deleting the old user dynamic array and returning the new one. And that's how we managed to pull through this part.
So once you logged in with your ID and password, you go into the regular menu. Unless you are a premium user, then you go to the premium menu. But in the regular menu, we just have a linked list of players and headers of size 21 because that's how many stats we have. It then reads the file, and rookie util and rookie class is something from the premium menu that we're going to use later for our rookie draft class. This is the part on line 49 where we talk about the regular access, which has 3 options: to view the stats of the player, to view them in ascending order via our player rank, and to exit our program. If you choose to see the stats, then you would have to choose whether to see the stats or the awards. If you display the stats, then you go to a method in our player util called display stats, and for awards the same thing. Here's our display stats, which goes through the entire list with using a template, n equals n, get next, getting the element, and then we get the name, get all their stats with using the printf function.
So it seems like you're using a pointer and a linked list for a lot of these displaying methods. What were some challenges related to these?
Probably just setting it up first. This part, the displaying stuff, is the easy part, but getting it to work where you read a player and it adds it to the list, and getting the next one correctly with the head and all that, that was definitely the tough part. This is the display awards. This is our other method. It does the same thing as display stats, but instead of going through the linked list and getting each player name and the player stats, we just get their awards, which is like MVPs, all NBA teams, and other things like that.
We are using a CSV file for that, right? Do you mind showing me the CSV file?
Sure. This is our CSV file that we used. It has all the things that are needed for the methods, all the points.
Where did you get these?
We used NBA reference, which is like it has every stat for every NBA player that has ever played. I just got the 2021 season. For the awards, we only took the 3 most recent years, because if we took all their awards, then a lot of veteran players who aren't as good right now would have an unfair advantage in our player worth calculation.
I see.
Other than that, if you want to view them in ascending order, you would go to this method, display player rank, which has 2 arrays, an int array of their rank and a string with their player name. We loop through the entire array of size 60 to get the worth of the player and to get the name. Then we have 2 arrays. We then use bubble sort to sort through them all, so it will rank them in ascending order, and then we just print it out. That is our main menu and our regular menu. These are very basic features. We saved the best features for our premium menu for the premium level access users. So once we're done with the regular menu, we can see if they logged in with the premium level access. This also has display stats and display awards, which is the same as the regular menu, but it has a new method called display, which is kind of the same as display stats, except it just gets their name and their player worth, which we got from the read file. That's pretty much it for displaying. If they enter 2, then we do the trade simulator, which is called assign teams, because that's the first thing they do.
So how does the algorithm for the assigning team work?
I'm so glad you asked, because it took a while. This was definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
So first we have players of array size 15, because that's the maximum amount of players on an NBA team per the rules. And we have a count to show how many players have been assigned to each team. We have assigned players to denote that if a player has been assigned or a player has not been assigned, because we loop through this many times, because we have a random digit that decides which team they go to. So if it's 1, they go to the Bucks. If it's 2, they go to the Lakers. If it's 3, they go to the Nets. And if the 4, they go to the Warriors.
I see a lot of if and else statements and a lot of complicated conditions. What do those conditions do exactly?
Well, the first one's pretty easy. It gets complicated later.
Okay, this is the easier part?
Oh yeah, this is definitely the
Okay.
easier part. So first, it checks if all of them have the exact same amount of players. If they do, then you can just add them, because we want to make sure that we don't end up with like 15, 0, 12, and 2 players, you know? So if we make sure they're all equal before we add them, then the Bucks will always have the most amount of players, followed by the Lakers, and then the Nets and the Warriors, but they'll only be off by 1. Now,
Okay, I see.
the next part, this is where it gets a little weird. So if the assignment, the random number was the Bucks, which is 1, and they have less players than everyone else, then you can add it. So if everyone else already has 3 players and you only have 2, then go ahead and add your players. And this does it for the Lakers as well, then the Nets and the Warriors. And if all goes to plan, everyone ends up with 15 players on their team. The next is the team selection. It's which team you're selecting as the one you want to be the GM of, so you can trade with another team. Team selection is pretty much the same as the assignment. 1 being Bucks, 2 being Lakers, 3 being Nets.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I have one question. So if according to your algorithm, so the players that will be assigned to each team will be random every time, right?
Yeah. We use the SRAN
okay.
feature as well.
Okay, sounds good. Okay.
So every time you run it, it'll be a new team.
New team. So
Um,
it would be a pretty good way to see how much your player will be valued against a player that you'd like to trade with, right?
yeah, it's kind of like a game, to see what fantasy trades you can come up with as well. Honestly.
I think it might be useful too, right?
Oh yeah, it's definitely useful. Like we explained in our intro, the GMs definitely could use
Yeah.
this to figure out trades that may not seem obvious at first. Like if you, like maybe some player has this huge value that we didn't know of, so you
think,
try to get it.
I think Bob Myers, GM from Golden State Warriors, can make some use for this. 'Cause
Yes.
he's not doing that good in FA right now.
Oh no, definitely
So,
not.
yeah. No.
So after you select your team, we print out the whole array of the players, depending on which team you selected, we would see out different players.
Sounds good.
See out's a count, which is 0 period the player name. So that would be how you select your players to trade.
Sounds good.
It would then see outs, these are your players, to denote that these are the people on your team. And then we initialize the value, because when you pick a player to trade, it adds the value. And you can also add draft picks down here. So when you select a player, you look at which number they are, what their count was, and you enter that. It puts that into the array, and it gets their worth, adds it to the value. does that for all 4 teams, because all 4 teams have different arrays of players, which was a pain to write, to have 4 options every time you entered an input. If you selected that you wanted a draft pick, it would, because you only get 2 draft picks a year. The NBA draft only has 2 rounds, the first and the second. So we go from year 2021 to 2026, because I believe you can't get a draft pick later than that, because it would be pretty weird to draft a 12-year-old right now, like from the 2029 draft. So I don't think you can do that.
And I don't think you can trade picks like 5-6 years from now too. Like, I think there's a restriction for that.
Yeah, there definitely
But
is. I think
that's a
team.
pretty good indicator.
Yeah, I think a team did that, and they were really bad for a really long time.
Yeah.
So, again, the count, which is the option you pick, plus the year, and if it's first or a second pick. This calculates how far away the pick is. If it's 2023, it'll be 2 years away, and because you entered like 0, right? Because the count is like 2022 first, 2022 second. So you have to divide it by 2 to figure out how far away it is, because it's an integer. It takes the 0.5 away.
So does the pick worth less when it's more years away from now, or does it worth more?
It's worth less because teams like closer drafts, because they can use their players right away. And if they have a young team, it's good to have it. If they have an old team, it's also good to have it to boost how good they are. So picks closer to today are better than picks further away.
Sounds pretty good. Okay.
To get the value, we take 50, which is how much the rookie was worth. How much the rookie was worth to multiply by 2. And we subtract it by how many years away it is multiplied by 2. So if it was 2 years away, it'd be -4. Unless it was a second round pick, because then it's worth even less. Second round pick is just mod 2. If it's an even number, then that means it is a first round pick. If it's an odd number, then it is a second round pick. We add the value to the draft pick value, and that's pretty much it. Unless and it keeps looping until you're good with how much players and picks you're willing to trade, and then you select another team. It asks you what team you want to select, and then we go through this again, which also having 4 selections, because you could have had 4 different teams. So this one is for the Bucks. It has Lakers, Nets, Warriors, and it just assigns a team selection to whatever the team was.
Sounds good.
In the beginning. Same numbers and everything. We do this 4 times because there's 4 different teams. And then we see out the players again, depending on what team they selected. Pretty much the same as the original one. We set the option to -1 because if it's 0, it might interfere with how the menu works repeatedly. And we initialize other team value, which is the same as the original value, except it's for the other team. These parts are all the same, the draft pick exactly the same, and then here we get to the interesting part where we compare the values and we make a variable called trade probability. This will calculate how likely or unlikely the trade will work. We start with the most likely thing to work, which is if the trade probability is greater than 30, which means you gave up a lot more than the other team did, then this trade will work, because the GM would be dumb to not accept this trade. The next one is if it was between -20 and 30, which is kind of bordering on, I don't know if it's okay for me to give up this player. Maybe they will have a breakout season next year or something. So this trade will most likely work. You have to do a little bit of convincing. And then if the trade is between -20 and -50, then the GM will have to be on like a really good day, and you will have to convince him pretty hard for this to work, because it is definitely not in his favor to accept this trade. And if it was -50, this probably will not work at all. There is you're probably asking for a superstar player at that point for something less than a superstar player, and that is our trade simulator. If it the user did not select assign teams, then we would go to draft year, which is use of recursion, and this generates a draft year from either 2021 to 2028, and it sets a value of 300 as the base. So the first thing we do is we generate data, which is we have from another CSV file. This takes two file names, which is firstname.csv and lastname.csv, and a number, which is which name we're going to pick out of the 100 names we have for each. This pretty much just gets lined because they're singly lined. Here are the first names that we have generated and the last names. Well, we got them from a list and we put them in the CSV file.
And as for the recursion method, it's basically a recursive method that will have go on until there are 60 players in the rookie draft, which there is 60 players in the, because there are 30 players from the first round and 30 players in the second round. What it does is, if pick count is greater than 59, which at this point will have exactly 60 players, it will see out first name, last name, and pick number as a header, and draft pick and potential as well. And we will loop through the pick count, which will be the number of rookies, and we'll see out rookies' first names, last names, draft year, potential, and so on and so forth. And until we have 60 players in the draft class, we'll generate a random number for both first name and last name. We'll use that to get ourselves unique first name and last name. And as for the values, we'll pass in initial value when we first call the recursion method, which will depreciate every time it goes on, because oftentimes when rookies are drafted, rookies that are drafted in the later picks are often considered to have less potential than the rookies that are drafted before them. And we'll assign these values, first name, last name, and values, to the rookie that are in the array, and pick count will increment by 1. And we'll call this recursion method within this recursion method until there are 60 rookies in the array. And that is about it for the rookies util.
So we're just going to go through a quick code run through now with our program, NBA Agent. It'll ask if you have an account with us, enter 1, if not enter 2 to register. If you try to enter with no accounts registered, it will give you an error. There are no registered users right now, so we will enter 2. We will enter our name, which is Derek, our ID, which is 111, and our password, which is 123. We can add more users if we want. For example, I'll add Jay real quick. He'll have an ID of 222, and he'll have a password of 456. So we can try to log in now. We enter 1, our ID, which is 111. But if we get our password wrong, say we enter Jay's password instead, it'll give us the wrong ID. So we forgot our password, we enter 1, let's say we did. Our ID, 111. And it'll show us our password. So let's try to log in now. Enter your ID, which is 111. And our password is 123. And now I'm logged in. If I want to choose a premium user or a regular user, I can select it. Let's say for now we will not like to upgrade, and we'll run through it again with the upgrade. Now we are a regular user. We can see the stats, view them in ascending order, and exit. So for right now, we'll just view the stats of the player. Or would you like to see stats or awards? I'd like to see your stats. And as you can see, we have all these players with their stats, with their points, steals, blocks, all that. And now we can see their awards. We enter 1 again, and we go see their awards. As you can see, we see all their awards. Now we can view them in ascending order by their player rank. We can see how well they're ranked. Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, James Harden, all at the top. They have won many awards over the past 3 years, and their stats are very good. And for now we exit the program because that's all we can do as a regular user. Now we will run through it again, but as a premium user, so we've already seen all the parts of the login. So I'm just gonna register very quickly. 111, 123, 1, 111, 123. Now let's go to the premium menu and see what those features are. We can have scat evaluation, trade simulator, rookie draft, and exit. Let's do the scat evaluation first. Let's view the player stats. We've seen that it's in the code. It's the same thing as the regular menu. So let's do display player worth, which is instead of their rank, it is their numerical value for how much they're worth. Now we can go to the trade simulator. First, you select a team you want to be on. Let's say I want to be on the Warriors. These are the list of players on my team, and I want to add players to my trade. So first, let's say we add Zion Williamson, and we can also add a draft pick. So let's say we want to give them the 2022 first round pick, and that's a trade. That's all the people we want to trade. Now we select another team. This time we cannot select the Warriors. So let's select the Bucks. These are their players they have. We select a player, then we select John Collins. And we also add a draft pick. Let's say we want the 2025 second round pick. And we can ask it if this trade will work. And they say the trade will work. Next up is the rookie draft. We enter a year after 2021 that we want to see the draft picks or the players in the draft. So let's say we want to go 2022. These are the players in the draft pick with the draft year and how our program sees their potential worth. Those are all our features for our premium menu. Now we exit the program and it says thank you for visiting. Another feature that we have is the admin, which you saw in our code, which can edit anything about a user. NBA admin can only be accessed if there's more than one user besides the admin, because if there wasn't an account, then the admin can't do anything. There wouldn't be a purpose to it. So let's enter an account. Again, Derek, enter an ID. Say we have ID of 1 and a password of 12. Then we go enter the admin ID. The admin ID is NBA admin and the password is NBA123. We are now logged in as the admin and we can see and modify any users we have. So first we can ask for a user report, which shows all the users on the file. Would you like to store it to a CSV file? We can say sure. Enter the CSV file name. We can call these users. We can now modify this information. So we decide the ID of the user. We edit the only other user. Say we think their password is too insecure. We can edit that. It can be 123654. And we can enter 5 to quit, or we can continue modifying. In this case, to show off the program, we'll continue modifying. We enter the ID of the program. Again, we enter 1. This time we can modify the username. Say they change their name. So now it's J. Enter, and we want to continue modifying because there's more features. We enter 1. We can now edit their access level as well. So if they paid for a premium access, now we can edit that. So instead of a regular user, they are now a premium user. And we can also edit their ID if we didn't like their ID number. Change it to 123. That is all the features. So we quit and then we exit the program.
And one last thing I want to add is this admin user modification part. This is the only way other users that are not hard-coded admin account can gain admin access.
Mm-hmm.
And after they gain the access level of admin, they can do the same thing. They can perform the same actions as the original admin account. And that's something that I wanted to add. And back to Derek.
Yeah, so they also get access to this menu.